The pervasive exhaustion defining modern life is not a result of physical labor, but a consequence of chronic cognitive overload. While previous generations engaged in grueling manual work, yet maintained the vitality for social and family life, today's society suffers from a persistent power outage. The fundamental change is the sheer volume of stimuli we consume. From the second we wake up, our brains are flooded with notifications, emails, and messages, processing more data before breakfast than our ancestors did in a full week. This constant bombardment, compounded by the pressure of multitasking and the digital noise of platforms like Slack and Zoom, leaves the brain in a state of perpetual flight or fright, screaming for a break that never comes. The tragedy of this modern fatigue is that it remains invisible to traditional medicine. Many people seek help only to find that their blood work, thyroid levels, and vitamins are perfectly normal. The diagnosis is usually stress, but the prescription to rest is difficult to follow because we have lost the actual skill of resting. We have mistakenly replaced true downtime with further stimulation, such as scrolling through social media while lying on the couch. This prevents the brain from ever truly switching off, leading to a state of burnout where the body is healthy, but the mind is utterly depleted. To find a solution, we can look toward Japan. Despite its well-known struggle with karoshi, death from overwork, Japanese culture also holds ancient practices of energy restoration used for centuries by the samurai. These concepts, now being validated by modern neuroscience, offer a way to manage energy rather than just time. By shifting away from the Western obsession with constant productivity and adopting these specific restorative principles, it is possible to break the cycle of exhaustion and regain the mental clarity required to truly live, rather than just survive. Modern exhaustion is not caused by physical labor, but by a cognitive power outage triggered by constant digital stimulation. While our grandparents had the energy to enjoy life after work, we live on autopilot, processing more information in a single morning than they did in an entire week. This constant bombardment leaves the brain in a state of perpetual stress that traditional medical tests often fail to detect. To combat this burnout, we can apply 3 ancestral Japanese practices now validated by modern neuroscience. The first is Seijaku, the art of active stillness, where spending time in total silence daily activates the brain's cleaning mode to purge mental fatigue. The second is Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing, which involves deliberately spending time in nature to lower cortisol levels and repair the damage caused by excessive screen time. The third is Inimurai, the practice of strategic napping, where brief rests provide a cognitive reset that can double alertness and boost creativity without the grogginess of deep sleep. These techniques, once mastered by samurai warriors, offer a way to escape the cycle of chronic tiredness. By moving away from the productivity trap and adopting these restorative habits, anyone can transform their relationship with energy and regain the vitality needed to truly live. Caleb lived in a state of perpetual exhaustion, that felt like an invisible weight pressing down on his life. Despite getting 8 hours of sleep, he woke up feeling depleted, immediately draining his mental battery by scrolling through notifications before even leaving his bed. As a systems analyst, his days were spent in a cycle of digital overload and artificial stimulation, relying on endless cups of coffee and energy drinks just to function like a robot on autopilot. Even simple tasks like going to the gym became agonizing hurdles, not due to a lack of physical strength, but because his mental willpower had completely evaporated. The most painful consequence of this fatigue was the growing distance between him and his wife, Clarice. Although he loved her deeply, he lacked the emotional and mental energy to engage in real conversation or intimacy. Upon returning home, he would retreat to the sofa and lose himself in mindless social media scrolling, the only activity that required zero effort. While Clarice watched him fade away and suggested he rest or take a trip, Caleb remained trapped in a cycle of denial, claiming he was just busy, while both of them knew his vitality was slowly disappearing. The breaking point arrived one evening when Clarice finally confronted Caleb, removing the phone from his hands to force a long overdue conversation. She laid bare the painful reality that he had become a hollow shell of himself, physically present but mentally absent and perpetually drained. Her words struck a deep chord when she questioned their dream of starting a family, pointing out that he lacked the energy to even sustain their relationship, let alone care for a child. This confrontation forced Caleb to face a harsh truth he had been avoiding. He was failing as a husband and was in no condition to become a father. For the first time, the weight of his exhaustion was heavier than his denial. Recognizing the toll his power outage was taking on their future, he finally listened to Clarice's plea and agreed to seek professional help, marking the first step toward breaking the cycle of burnout that had consumed his life. Chapter 3: The Consultation. Caleb eventually found himself in the minimalist office of Dr. Yuki, an integrative medicine specialist who prioritized conversation over clinical paperwork. Instead of immediately reviewing his symptoms, she invited him to share a cup of tea and discuss his daily life. When she asked when he last felt genuinely rested, Caleb was struck by the realization that he couldn't remember a single moment of true vitality in years. Despite Caleb's insistence that his medical tests were all normal, Dr. Yuki identified the core issue with a single question about when he last experienced absolute stillness. Caleb admitted that he was never without some form of digital or auditory distraction, whether it was his phone, television, or music. The doctor explained that his inability to exist in silence was the root of his exhaustion, confirming that his power outage was a direct result of never allowing his mind to simply be. Chapter 4: The Revelation. Dr. Yuki shifted the conversation toward the legendary samurai, explaining that these warriors were far more than mere fighters. They were experts in managing their internal vitality. She pointed out that while they were constantly required to be alert and ready for battle, they did not live in a state of exhaustion. This was because they understood that energy is something to be cultivated through specific habits, rather than something that should be forced. She introduced Caleb to 3 core concepts that allowed the samurai to remain sharp and resilient, practices that modern neuroscience is only recently beginning to validate. Dr. Yuki identified these as Sajaku, the practice of active stillness, Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing, and Inimuri, the art of strategic napping. She looked Caleb in the eyes and told him he didn't need a prescription. Instead, he needed to retrain his brain by adopting these ancient methods to restore his depleted energy. Chapter 5. The 3 concepts. Dr. Yuki began by explaining Sajaku, or active stillness, identifying mental noise as Caleb's primary energy thief. She compared his brain to an overheated computer running too many background programs. By practicing 10 minutes of total silence each morning without digital distractions, Caleb could trigger his brain's cleaning mode, allowing it to organize itself internally and recover from cognitive overload. She then introduced Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing, explaining that nature provides a physiological reset for the human body. Unlike a strenuous hike, this practice involves simply existing in a natural environment to absorb its rhythms. Dr. Yuki cited studies showing that just 2 hours in nature significantly slashes cortisol levels and boosts the immune system, effectively acting as a biological antidote to the frantic pace of the city. Caleb's second task was to spend an hour in a park twice a week, completely disconnected from technology. Finally, they discussed Inimuri, the art of strategic napping. Dr. Yuki debunked the idea that napping is a sign of laziness, instead framing it as a vital replenishment of finite energy. She instructed Caleb to take 15-minute power naps after lunch, emphasizing that they must be brief to avoid the grogginess of deep sleep. By combining these 3 ancestral techniques, morning silence, nature immersion, and strategic rest, Caleb was given a practical roadmap to rewire his brain and reclaim his vitality over the next 30 days. Chapter 6. The Process. Caleb's first week was defined by deep resistance as he struggled to break his long-standing habits. On the first day of practicing Seijaku, 10 minutes of silence felt like an eternity. His mind raced with work anxieties, and he had to fight the physical urge to grab his phone. Despite the discomfort, he forced himself to finish, marking his first victory over mental noise. By the 3rd day, Caleb attempted Shinrin-yoku by visiting a local park without his phone. Initial feelings of boredom and pointlessness eventually gave way to a sensory connection with his surroundings. As he observed the wind and the trees, he experienced a profound sense of calm he hadn't felt in years, realizing upon leaving that he hadn't thought about his job a single time during the hour. On the 5th day, he integrated Inamuri into his workday. Though he struggled to quiet his mind at first, he eventually drifted into a light rest. When the 15-minute alarm went off, he felt a surprising mental reset. This brief pause eliminated his usual mid-afternoon energy crash, allowing him to finish his tasks with a clarity that had previously seemed impossible. By the 2nd week, the physical and mental fog began to lift. Caleb followed his routine diligently and noticed that his morning digital anxiety had vanished. His sleep became deeper and more restorative, while his newfound mental clarity allowed him to complete work tasks more efficiently. Most significantly, this surplus energy began to heal his marriage. He no longer retreated to the sofa in silence, and for the first time in months, He and Clarice shared a night of genuine connection and intimacy. The third week brought a profound realization during a session of Shinrin-yoku. Caleb understood that his chronic exhaustion wasn't a medical failure, but a result of living in constant resistance to his own biological needs. He had spent years fighting his brain by forcing productivity through noise and stimulation. By finally embracing silence, nature, and strategic rest, he stopped fighting his biology and started working with it. This shift is backed by modern neuroscience. As experts like Dr. Andrew Huberman point out, intentional periods of inactivity, like seijaku, activate the default mode network. This neurological state allows the brain to consolidate memories, process complex emotions, and physically flush out metabolic toxins. Caleb wasn't just relaxing. He was allowing his brain to perform the essential maintenance it had been denied for years. Scientific research further reinforces these ancient practices. Dr. Ching Li has demonstrated that Shinrin-yoku has direct medicinal benefits. Trees release phytoncides that, when inhaled, significantly boost the body's natural virus-fighting cells. Similarly, sleep expert Dr. Sarah Mednick has confirmed that inamuri, or brief strategic naps, are the most effective way to restore cognitive performance without the lingering grogginess of deeper sleep cycles. During Caleb's final follow-up, Dr. Yuki revealed the ultimate secret of the samurai. Their efficiency didn't come from superior strength, but from the conservation of power. They fought in a state of active stillness, using only the exact amount of force required. She explained that Caleb's true breakthrough wasn't about finding new energy, but rather stopping the leaks that drained his existing reserves. Caleb realized that his reliance on caffeine was a poor substitute for efficiency. He had been hemorrhaging energy through constant multitasking, digital distractions, and emotional stress. By applying these Japanese principles, he learned to stop wasting his mental and physical resources on trivialities. This shift allowed him to naturally retain enough vitality for the things that truly mattered: his health, his career, and his family. Chapter 7. 4 months later. 4 months later, Caleb's life had been completely transformed. Sitting on the same couch where he once sat in a digital trance, he shared a moment of pure joy with Clarice as they looked at a positive pregnancy test. They were finally ready for this new chapter, not just because they wanted it, but because Caleb finally had the emotional and mental vitality required to be a present father and husband. He had successfully moved from a state of chronic depletion to one of abundance. This recovery was rooted in the 3 pillars of samurai wisdom: seijaku for mental restoration, Shinrin-yoku for physiological healing, and inamuri for strategic energy replenishment. These ancient practices provided Caleb with a roadmap to stop the energy leaks caused by modern life. He discovered that the secret to a vibrant life isn't about chasing external stimulants, but about protecting and cultivating the internal energy he already